I remember the Arctic wind lashing my face, chilling me to the bone as I jumped out of the snowmobile and onto the drifting ice floe, practically gasping from the cold. Above my head, the northern lights were performing something unimaginable, tearing the darkness apart into dancing, spectral ribbons of light. And under this unearthly glow, the entire Arctic seemed to come alive, breathing something ancient and unknown. I'm Mark Aldrich, a local physicist and one of the operators at the Polaris station, and I've been stuck here for over a year. My routine: daily excursions into this icy hell, checking the drills, the beacons, just the usual polar tedium. Richard, my colleague, usually tagged along, but he'd bailed that day, so I went alone. I knew the area like the back of my hand and wasn't expecting anything unusual at all. But that evening, something went wrong. Terribly wrong. The familiar crunch of ice suddenly gave way to a sound that was unnervingly unnatural. A low, metallic screech, like a giant piece of sandpaper grating iron on stone. For the first time, goosebumps ran over me, not from the cursed cold, but from a kind of ancient primal terror. I stared into the pitch-black darkness, expecting to see a lead or a fissure, something normal for the Arctic. But what emerged from beneath the snow, it defied all logic. Slowly, very slowly, a rusty behemoth crawled out from under the snow and thick ice. I squinted and realized I was staring at a piece of a submarine. A real, honest-to-God submarine. I mean, have you ever heard of submarines surfacing in the middle of an ice field like ghost whales? It rose as if an invisible hand was pushing it up from the abyss itself. Its hull was cracked, rusted, and encased in centuries-old ice. It looked like it had been asleep for an eternity. My brain immediately exploded with 1,000 questions. The Arctic is full of surprises, of course. Over the years of the mission, we'd found all sorts of shipwreckage, expedition remains. But this? For a submarine to just spontaneously surface after, as it later turned out, a whole century. That was unprecedented. The cold was crippling, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from this dark hulk barely visible in the twilight. It looked like it had crawled out of another dimension, from a time when subs were more myth than reality. I grabbed the radio. "Base, come in! Urgent support needed. I found a submarine. Coordinates are such and such. This is no joke, damn it." Meanwhile, the screeching was only intensifying. It sounded like something was moving inside, cracking and breaking the ice, exposing steel covered in some kind of sea crud and barnacles. I terribly wanted to get closer, to examine this marvel, but a sticky fear held me back. I couldn't explain why. Maybe the horrific sound, maybe the way the vessel seemed to be coming alive before my eyes. The base immediately responded. "Mark, hold your position. Sending a team." To hell with orders. I cautiously moved forward, scanning around. The blizzard was intensifying, icy swirls concealing everything. Somewhere over the ridge of hummocks, my snowmobile waited, but the moment I took a couple of steps toward that iron mass, the snow swirled around, turning into a white wall. The snowmobile, the station, everything vanished as if it had never been. The blizzard became a full-blown whiteout, and I was alone with this monstrous machine from another time. I got closer and saw a burst-open hatch. A twisted metal ladder stuck out of it, leading into pitch darkness. Curiosity is a nasty thing. It literally shoved me forward, and I peered inside, lighting the way with my flashlight. I'd always considered myself a pragmatist, without any superstitions. But from the depth of that black hole, such an eerie feeling emanated. Such a dead, cold silence that it made my teeth ache. I barely managed to pull myself away. Go in there alone? Pure suicide. The wind howled, and in its moan, I thought I heard strange sounds, almost a whisper, as if someone was trying to say something. I blinked, and it seemed like something flickered in that black abyss. Some kind of silhouette. Well, I blamed it on the shaky flashlight and my overloaded imagination, and stepped back. About 15 minutes later, the team from the base finally broke through the howl of the blizzard. Michael and Kevin. They looked just as stunned as I was, though they didn't say a word. We just exchanged glances, and we knew without speaking. Our quiet life in this icy wilderness was over. Forever. Back at the station, we, of course, raised hell. We informed our expedition chief, Andrew Winters, about the sighting of a ghost submarine from the distant past. The detection was anomalous. The object was emitting unusual signals, like a pulsating phantom beneath the ice. Winters, a seasoned polar explorer with 30 years of experience, listened to the news with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "It's simply unreal, absolutely impossible," he muttered. "In these waters, at that depth, where pressure could crush any modern apparatus, there should be no subs, especially not ones this old." The idea that the ice could push a vessel that had rested on the seabed for a century up to the surface seemed absurd. But curiosity won out. Within an hour, we, myself, engineer Michael, security expert Kevin, and biologist Hannah, had gathered our gear. Winters, despite his age, volunteered to lead the squad. We took powerful flashlights, first aid kits, ice knives, radio beacons, and protective suits. I couldn't shake the thought of the strange silhouette that had flashed in the hatch on one of the scans. The next morning, the blizzard subsided and we headed towards the spot where the colossal frozen vessel jutted out. From afar, it looked like a dark iceberg, but as we approached, its outline became clearer. It was a massive, rust-covered and encrusted leviathan, a dark stain against the white landscape. Hannah was the first to notice something unusual. Beneath the layer of grime and corrosion, she found remnants of paint. Using a reagent, we wiped off the buildup and saw the inscription, "Invincible," an English word written in an old, ornate script from the early last century. It immediately became clear that this was not just an ancient wreck, but a genuine artifact, possibly a secret development lost 100 years ago. Winters ordered us to breach the hatch. It was dangerous. Gases could have accumulated inside and the metal might crumble. Kevin meticulously secured the safety rope. I followed him. The screech of metal as we struggled to open the jammed hatch was deafening, followed by a sharp hiss of escaping air. Cold, stale, heavy with the smell of rust and ages of isolation. Inside, we were met by a sharp, acrid odor. The corridors were narrow, cracked, and the floor was covered with a thick layer of ice. Stalactites hung from the ceilings. It was surprising that the compartment doors had maintained their shape and, in places, even their paint. It felt like a journey into frozen time. Reaching the central control room, I shined my flashlight on the dashboard. Dials were frozen, needles stopped at unbelievable readings. Nearby, on a chair, lay a book. Kevin carefully picked it up with an ice axe, but it immediately crumbled to dust. Only a couple of pages flashed by, mentioning a logbook, torpedo tests, and an unknown ice object. In the dead silence, a soft, drawn-out moan echoed. I flinched and caught a glimpse of something dark around the corner. "Who's there?" I blurted out. We stepped forward, but there was no one. Only the echo of our footsteps and an unsettling silence. We climbed back out, where Winters and Hannah were waiting. They had set up a mini-base. I nodded to Hannah, trying to look composed. Winters listened to our report. "Well," he said, "we must continue. This is only the beginning." This old submarine, rusted through, was somehow still afloat, defying time and logic. And it was just the start of our strangest, most dangerous expedition. How did it surface? What sank it, and how long had it been in the icy trap? Questions swirled in my head. Perhaps an iceberg or an underwater earthquake had entombed the sub. But how did it end up on the surface after so many years? The tattered pages of the journal provided an answer. Lads, it's been about 100 years. We were stunned. Hannah, her voice trembling. 100 years? No one has found subs this old in the Arctic. This is a mystery. Impossible. Her words echoed in the compartment, underlining the improbability of the find. Winters contacted the mainland, sending photos and coordinates. Arctic communication is slow. We'd have to wait at least 2 days for a reply. Storms could cut us off, leaving us completely isolated. We were alone, face to face with this secret, lost among the icy expanses. I spent that evening in my cabin, trying to process what I had seen. My brain refused to accept reality. Outside the porthole was the impenetrable Arctic night. Richard returned, still pale. He listened to my story with disbelief. Are you sure this isn't a hoax, not just some glitches? I told him about the frozen instruments, the unfamiliar plating, the chilling moan. Richard was silent for a long time, then slowly offered, "What if there are bodies left behind?" At those words, my breath hitched. Images arose in my mind of dark, icy compartments where long-dead sailors rested in eternal cold. Their bones, perhaps in decayed uniforms, in this iron tomb. The thought was both terrifying and compelling. Chatte. The next day, we again headed toward the icy guest, feeling like archaeologists. I had thoroughly prepared. Oxygen tank, powerful floodlights, protective suit. Hannah suggested filming everything. Our mission, to venture deeper, find clues, and shed light on the crew and the sub's fate. A heavy gloom oppressed us inside. The floodlights picked out surprisingly intact pipes, mechanisms, and massive rivets. Ice had permeated the metal, forming crystalline patterns. I moved toward the narrow passage to the torpedo bay, trying not to think about what awaited. I thought I heard scuttling sounds. My reason tried to calm me. It's just dripping water, the ice settling. But something inside didn't believe it. The torpedo bay was surreal. Torpedoes were frozen in their racks, encased in a thick layer of ice, like icy obelisks. On one casing, a factory stamp from the early 20th century, perhaps WWI era. The ice was unusually chilling, as if preserving something ancient and sinister. A bad omen enveloped my consciousness. Michael was digging through drawers and pulled out a logbook with pages stuck together. Nearby, a waterlogged but intact book. The cover read, "Robert Hart, someone's personal diary. A key to a century-old mystery." Suddenly, Hannah froze, crouching down in front of something. Her flashlight trembled. It was a gruesome figure, entirely covered in frost and ice like a statue. I knew we might find remains, but my heart clenched. The figure was sitting, knees drawn to its chest, a grimacing mouth frozen on its face in a silent scream. An ice doll frozen in agony. Touching its shoulder, the ice crust cracked, revealing the dark blue fabric of a uniform. In the breast pocket, a dog tag with the name Anil. We had disturbed the peace of a dead man, frozen in this icy hell, far from home, alone. Hannah looked like a ghost. Michael was banging on doors, trying to open a jammed compartment. A mounting horror pierced me. If we found Anil's body here, how many more ice dolls were in the other compartments? Dozens. Hundreds. The thought was paralyzing. Just then, Kevin's voice, full of panic, broke through the radio. He was exploring the central corridor. "Doors! Guys, do you hear that? We're not alone here." His voice cut out, leaving us in a ringing silence. We froze, and then, from the bowels of the submarine, came a sound. Thump, thump, thump. Right on the metal, clear, rhythmic, as if someone was deliberately beating out a message there. Hannah tried to dismiss it. Maybe the ice is cracking? But her voice was trembling like an aspen leaf, and it was clear she didn't believe it for a second. The sounds were just too distinct. We hurried after Kevin toward the source of the dreadful thumping, and there it was, the engine room. And there, in the gloom cut by our flashlight beams, I saw faint lights right on the control panel. A century-old submarine covered in rust, and inside, electricity. It was incomprehensible. "Is the generator working or something?" Michael blurted out, but we knew it was impossible. All the batteries should have long since crumbled to dust. No autonomous system could have lasted a whole century. And then we were almost at those flickering lights, and our flashlights snatched a figure from the shadows, in an old-fashioned officer's tunic. I simply turned to Stone. He was standing with his back to us, slowly doing something at the panel. His haircut wasn't modern, his tunic was from another era. My brain refused to believe. Was it a ghost? Or had we gone mad? And then he turned. Our flashlights caught his face. Young, about 30, but his skin was unnaturally pale, with a deathly white sheen. His eyes, they were fixed directly on us, as if he saw us through time. His lips moved, but there was no sound. I heard Hannah's scream, Kevin's curses over the radio, and we just froze, pinned in place by an invisible force, and then he simply vanished into thin air, stepped into the side corridor and disappeared, like a phantom, like a mirage, dissolved into the shadows. To say we were shocked is an understatement. A chill went down my spine and my mind was a carousel of thoughts. It's impossible, but we all saw it. But the worst thing was we felt his presence. It wasn't just a vision, not a trick of light and shadow. We felt his energy, his coldness, his existence. It was something more than just a ghost. We rushed after him, of course, but the corridor was empty. Hannah, flashlight shaking in her hand, cried, "He couldn't have just disappeared." But a terrible suspicion was growing inside me. This submarine, it doesn't seem to obey the normal laws of time, or at least, not as we know them. We returned to base in complete shock, shaking, barely able to stand. Winters, waiting for us at the camp, listened to our disjointed story. The ghostly sailor, the working mechanisms, the bodies untouched by time. He tried to blame it on gases or hallucinations, of course, but there was no conviction in his voice. We showed him Hannah's camera footage. The quality wasn't great, but for a split second a figure in a dark tunic did flash by, and his face, only for a fraction of a second. Winters whispered, "This is a nightmare." Just then, news arrived from the mainland over the radio. There was no mention of a submarine named Invincible in the archives, as if it had never existed. Or perhaps it was some kind of top-secret project hidden from prying eyes since the early 20th century. That very night, all hell broke loose. A storm hit the station with full force. The wind howled, the equipment malfunctioned, and suddenly, a strange signal broke through the radio. Static, hissing, and then fragments of phrases in Old English. "Ice trap, Captain Barnsey." Sitting at the console, I felt my heart skip a beat. It was as if it was the voice of the crew itself of that cursed submarine. Richard rushed in at the noise, grabbed the headphones, listened, and his face turned whiter than snow. "Someone's calling for help," he whispered. "Says the crew's been stuck here for 100 years and can't leave these waters." The speaker hissed again, and the voice disappeared. We exchanged horrified glances. What if the souls of the dead were trying to reach us from the very depths of the ice? In the morning, Winters, despite the trauma, announced, "We must continue, but with extreme caution." He planned a daytime excursion. He and Hannah would go back inside the sub, and Michael and I would prepare special generators. Who knows what other secrets this icy crypt hides? Well, we had to prepare the pumps to drain the water if we stumbled upon flooded compartments. Kevin, as always, volunteered to check out the sub's exterior, how it had surfaced, and what mechanism was at work. Yesterday, we'd barely managed to hack our way through the ice and hit a depressurized section in the stern. But my gut feeling, that sixth sense, screamed. This wasn't just about iron and technical malfunctions. All my thoughts revolved around that pale officer. His eyes, they just wouldn't leave my head. There was no malice in them, only a kind of all-consuming emptiness, as if he had lost all humanity but couldn't find peace. A chilling sight. But what started as a typical daytime outing turned into an utter nightmare. Kevin was the first to disappear. Silence on the radio. He just vanished into thin air. Michael, Hannah, and I immediately rushed after his tracks, of course. At the hatch, no one, but the snow around it was like after a battle, all trampled. We figured, well, he must be inside after all. And then, it got even darker. In the central corridor, in one of the compartments, we stumbled upon his equipment and hat. But Kevin was nowhere. Suddenly, the beams of our flashlights pulled a row of sleeping figures from the pitch black. Cautiously, step by step, we approached and realized they were sailors. They were lying so neatly, as if someone had carefully arranged them, covering them with the thinnest layer of ice. Their hands were lifelessly folded across their chests. Old uniforms, insignia, sailors and officers alike. 15 people, maybe more. But the most chilling thing was their faces. No agony, no fear. It seemed they had simply fallen asleep. A deep, eternal sleep. The moment we stepped closer to these frosted dead men, the floor beneath our feet creaked horribly. Michael screamed for us to retreat, afraid we would fall into a flooded compartment. But the cracking suddenly stopped. And the only thing disturbing the dead silence was the frantic pounding of our own hearts in our ears. We looked around, and then a shadow flickered around the corner. A human silhouette in an old naval uniform. He slowly turned to us, and in the flashlight's beam, I recognized him. The same pale officer from the footage. Now he looked us straight in the eye and whispered, softly, but with such a heartbreaking intensity that shivers ran down my spine. "Why have you come?" There was so much pain, so much helplessness in that question, that the blood froze in our veins. No one could utter a word. A moment later, the figure simply melted into the deepening darkness of the corridor. And this time, we were absolutely certain. It was his voice. This was no mere trick of the imagination. We searched the entire ship, shouting Kevin's name, but all in vain. In one of the wardrooms, or as I called it to myself, the witch's mess hall, we stumbled upon traces. Broken tables, dishes covered with centuries-old mold. And there, Kevin's flask. We recognized it by the tag. So, he had been here very recently. Finally, Hannah noticed it. Drops of fresh blood on the floor leading... Where do you think? Directly to the captain's bridge. Just then, Winter's voice crackled on the radio. "Guys, something's happening. We found logs, Captain Barnes's, judging by the handwriting. And according to these records, the sub was on a secret expedition. They were searching for a source of unusual energy in the ice. Exactly 100 years ago. The journal says they encountered an anomaly, and the crew started having hallucinations. Then contact with the surface was cut off, and the sub disappeared." He didn't finish. A terrible static burst from the radio, followed by a wild, blood-curdling scream from Winters. We didn't hesitate, rushing to find them, sprinting through those narrow passages, lighting our way with trembling flashlight beams. Every rustle seemed like a pair of ghostly eyes watching us from every shadow. Finally, we burst into the compartment lined with control panels. And there, Winters. He stood in the middle of the room, clutching his shoulder, from which blood was gushing, and surrounding him, several figures in naval uniforms. They were semi-transparent, flickering with an eerie bluish light. Their faces, they looked petrified, like those who had long forgotten what life was, but whose soul, or something else, stubbornly clung to this world. Michael, of course, yelled, "Get away from him!" But the spectral figures paid no mind. One of them, outlining a female sailor, leaned over Winter's wound as if studying it. Then she raised her lifeless eyes to us. Instantly, all the other ghosts simultaneously turned their heads in our direction. The woman's face, it contorted. It was as if she whispered something. I flinched when I heard the words sounding from everywhere and nowhere at once, like an echo trapped in metal. "We're stuck in the ice. Save us." A chill ran through my bones so deep I wanted to bolt, but sheer panic locked me in place. Hannah, trembling all over, barely managed to squeeze out, "How can we help you?" The ghostly sailors simply fell silent, and then began to vanish one by one, like shadows dissolving in the pulsating light of the instrument panels. Only the officer remained, the one in the uniform jacket. He looked at Winters, then at us, and spoke in an icy voice, "Too late," and dissolved into the air. My hand froze, clutching the flashlight, and an inhuman cold settled inside me, not from the temperature, but from a horrific realization. This crew, they are neither dead nor alive. They are trapped somewhere between worlds, caught in a loop of time and space, and it seems we are now becoming part of their nightmare. We barely managed to pull the wounded Winters out of the submarine. We never found Kevin on the way out. Neither him nor any trace. Only his ripped jacket, jammed in a punctured bulkhead as if the abyss itself had swallowed him. The bridge was half flooded, and a dull rumble came from it, as if someone was starting an engine deep in the ship's gut. We rushed away, knowing inevitable doom awaited us there. Winters kept mumbling that he could hear the voices of those spectral sailors right inside his head. We dragged him onto the ice, hastily rigged a sled for him on the snowmobile. The situation grew more volatile by the minute. A new blizzard, fiercer than the last, was rolling in, and the Invincible still jutted out in the distance, like an eternal sentinel, biting into the white silence. A few hours later, we returned to the station. Winters was placed in a makeshift infirmary, but the doctors simply shrugged. Besides a deep cut on his shoulder, he had severe mental disorientation. He kept repeating, "It's not the end, they're coming back." Communication with the mainland suddenly became awful. We couldn't transmit full reports, only catching signal fragments. Hannah and I, still reeling from what we had seen, decided to review everything we had captured on the camera. And that's when we caught faint voices we had missed in person. "They must finish the mission. We will return for them." These phrases sounded as if the sailors wanted someone to finish their work. But what was their plan? What the hell were they looking for in that ice? At dawn, a new blow struck. Several generators at the station failed for no apparent reason, and in the hangar, the equipment was covered in ice from the inside, as if the cold itself was seeping right through the metal. Richard, who was fixing the radio, yelled, "Someone walk through here!" And indeed, on the hangar floor we found wet, barefoot prints leading to the exit. The guests from the submarine immediately came to mind. It seemed they were already here, and these distances meant nothing to them. Something about their state places them beyond human limits. I was urgently called to the infirmary. Winter's condition had rapidly deteriorated. He thrashed in delirium, his eyes feverishly bright. "They're calling me. Captain Barnes asks me to return to the ship," he kept repeating. A chill ran through me at those words, as the name Barnes had already appeared in the captain's log. "No, no, don't take my soul," he whispered next. Suddenly, the infirmary door cracked open and Michael's face appeared in the gap. He spoke in a low voice. "We found out something. There's an extensive cave system beneath the ice, which is likely where the submarine emerged from. And it seems this place serves as a kind of spatial bubble. The crew is stuck between life and death, not perceiving the passage of time." Richard showed me the scanner data. It displayed a strange field, clearly a localized anomaly. "If we expose or investigate this area now, I'm afraid we'll release something uncontrollable," he stated. Hannah flew up to us, clutching some of Captain Barnes's personal notes she had hastily translated. I managed to grab a couple of lines. Barnes had scribbled that their expedition was sent to the poles for a reason. They were supposed to unearth some artifact or energy source rumored to be connected to the Earth's magnetic field. He wrote about the key to future supremacy and how the whole crew was slowly losing their grip on reality. The captain swore that some shadow was creeping after them, right beneath the water, and the deck was roamed by the dead. And then the last entry: the ice closed over us, and time stopped. We waited for night, nerves stretched taut like a string. Winters was fading fast. Soon he almost stopped breathing, but at the last moment he suddenly threw his eyes open and whispered, barely audible, "Forgive us. This mission cannot be completed." And that was it. He fell silent forever. Just like that, we lost our leader right in this icy trap. At that very hour, communication with the outside world broke off completely. The remaining people at the station truly panicked. Michael tried to calm everyone, but when we tried to start the snowmobiles, their engines were coated with frost from the inside and the fuel had turned into some incomprehensibly viscous sludge. Our station was becoming a deadly trap. Hannah suddenly decided, "We have to go back to the sub. There must be some clues there. Maybe info on how to shut down this anomaly, or something like that." Going back there felt like pure suicide, but staying put was pointless. Approaching the hulk, I felt a physical pressure, as if space itself was contracting around us. The entry hatch was even more torn than before. The metal looked stretched, bulging outward. Inside, we were met by a suffocating cold. The metal corridors seemed distorted, and in the gloom, I made out strange frost patterns on the walls, resembling human faces frozen in a scream. One thought pounded in my head. This place is becoming increasingly alien to reality. When we reached the central post, spectral figures were everywhere. Suddenly, the officer with the deathly pale face materialized right out of the air. He looked at Hannah, then at me, and spoke so that every syllable echoed through the metal bulkheads. "You shouldn't have come. You are a century too late. What do you want? Why are you here?" I stammered. He closed his eyes, then quietly said, "We were following orders. Our sacrifice was not in vain. Time vanished. Now we need to finish what we were sent for." Another flash erupted, and there stood Captain Barnes. He glared at the officer. "Robert, we have no right to cling to other people's lives. These newcomers will not complete our mission." The one he called Robert shook his head. "But we have no other way, Captain. We are stuck." Barnes looked straight at me. "Leave, close this path. Freeze us before it's too late, or it's the end for the whole world." Michael screamed, being dragged towards a translucent figure. My hand passed right through the ghostly body, feeling only an icy cold. Michael collapsed unconscious. "Time is running out," the captain rasped. The sub began to creak and groan. The sailor ghosts instantly dissolved. We had only one choice: run. We hauled the ragdoll-like Michael toward the exit. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a horrific vision. Dozens of officers and sailors frozen in a flooded compartment. their faces contorted in terror. Captain Barnes pressed his hand to his temple and closed his eyes. I blinked, and it all disappeared. Through the raging blizzard, we heard a guttural rumble from beneath the ice. The submarine was being pulled down. After several drawn-out metallic screeches, the Invincible slowly submerged. A wild relief mixed with horror pierced me. The Devil's machine was sinking back into the icy abyss. We returned to the station, exhausted. The Arctic itself seemed to be devouring the cursed submarine. Michael lay under a blanket, mumbling in delirium about their eyes, the cold, and the unfinished business. We all understood the Invincible had to be sealed in the ice for thousands of years. By morning, everything was quiet. We managed to restore communication and sent an SOS. When asked about the submarine, I shrugged. It vanished, quietly, slowly, but forever. The Arctic just swallowed that behemoth. Of course, no one will believe us. There's no room for ghosts in official reports, but Captain Barnes's gaze and his words, "Close this path," are stuck in my head forever. I still have nightmares. I walk through the dark, flooded corridors of the submarine, seeing the faces of the dead. I hear their whisper, "We never finished. We must return." The station was officially closed due to unstable ice conditions. No one speaks about the Invincible, but I know the truth. The Arctic is holding its breath. In the eternal ice, the submarine slumbers, its crew trapped between worlds. If someone disturbs that peace, they will return. They will return and take everyone who stands between them and their unfinished business to continue their devilish, world-threatening mission. That unfinished mission. It still haunts me, like an invisible shadow chained to my soul. Every time complete silence descends, that absolute, all-consuming silence that only exists in the most remote corners of the world. I feel that icy, ghostly gaze on the back of my neck. It penetrates flesh and bone, reaching the very core of my being. And frankly, I don't need any proof to understand. It hasn't gone anywhere. The very Invincible, whose name I'm afraid to utter aloud, whose presence is felt even through the thickness of time and ice. It is the embodiment of the Arctic itself, its merciless primal power, its ability to keep secrets that should remain untold. I get goosebumps when I imagine how many more horrifying secrets are hidden under this endless, eternal ice. Maybe they are portals to other dimensions, or simply the embodiment of pure primal horror, sealed in an icy prison for millions of years. But honestly, I swear, I have no intention of checking. And I advise you not to either. Any curiosity in these latitudes is an invitation to doom. A one-way ticket to a world where logic and common sense lose all meaning. Sometimes, it's better to let the past sleep peacefully, buried forever under miles of ice and snow. Let its secrets remain untouched, its ghosts silent, rather than confronting the dead who are still continuing their final, now unnecessary march. They do not seek rest, nor do they crave vengeance. They just walk. Their march is an endless, senseless movement, devoid of purpose but filled with terrifying resolve. And if one day some icebreaker, equipped with the latest technology, accidentally stumbles upon that steel shadow that has been hiding there, under the ice, for centuries, I'm afraid the answer to the question, who's there, will no longer bring them salvation. No radars, no sonars, no safety protocols will prepare them for what they will discover. This won't be just a discovery, it will be an awakening, because it will already be there. Its ghostly gaze, which I feel on the back of my neck, will become a reality for them. Everything will simply repeat itself. The cycle will be started anew, and nothing will be able to stop it. Because the dead from the deep, they don't go anywhere. They just wait. They wait for the ice to thin, for human curiosity to reach its peak, for the world to be ready to receive them again. And this waiting is the most terrifying thing of all.